everyone. Welcome to the first ever video of 2013, and I figured why not get started with something that has to sort of do with this particular date, the first, and that is time. Yes, I think we're all familiar with the fact that times are changing and changing constantly, and with a changing year, there is a changing atmosphere and a changing approach to the way we view maybe life, or have something that goes on within our own lives personally that changes, and that all is really reflected based upon time. And so I figured, why not for this Music Talk Tuesday talk briefly about some of the songs that I enjoy that have to do with time, or really mention time in the song, because most of the songs that I did pick do reference time, even if it is maybe not in the title of the song. But I think time has a fairly big impact on a lot of people, and I think time can be reflected upon other aspects of life as well, and how we handle time and what we do with time. And so I figured, why not start with one of the more famous songs that people probably know of that deals with time, and the song is basically called Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. And yes, this song was made in the 80s, and it does sort of have this sort of 80s vibe to it. And the interesting background behind this song is that Cyndi Lauper actually watched a movie that had, I think the guy's name was Malcolm McDowell in it, and it was a 1979 movie, and it was called Time After Time. And so that's literally where she got the idea for the title of the song, and then they claimed to be using proper copyright, and so they were able to use the song as their title. What I like about this song is kind of how it has sort of this bittersweet energy to it, because it does reflect upon a sort of more romantic relationship, but sort of the bittersweet aspects of it because of the fact that these two people seem to be on different paces when it comes to the relationship, and the way one perceives the other is rather different, or slower or faster than the other. So and this is really emphasized with the lyrics when she says something to the effect of, I fall behind, the drum beats out of time. Those kinds of lyrics, I think, reflect on the idea of two people not being on the same page as far as their relationship, and how that's really impacting the way they perceive each other. And it's also interesting to have somebody else sort of singing along with her to sort of emphasize these two different characters within the song. And I like her voice throughout the entire song. It does have this kind of more of a delicate and more of a sort of kind of heartbroken tone to it. Even though it is emphasized in the song, I believe that the characters, or the two people that the song is addressing, are still have strong feelings for each other. It still kind of brings out that effect of time, and how the way we perceive people may be different from the way somebody else perceives us through time. and I think it brings up a good point as to how people ultimately would deal with these circumstances. And I think it's one of those interesting songs, and sort of reflects upon how you know, if you in one particular part of the lyrics it says, like, if you fall I will catch you and I will be waiting, sort of like I know that we're not on the same page, but sort of having this kind of hope and sense of that we will eventually meet through time and maybe understand each other ultimately through time. And I find it fairly interesting how time can be so impacting upon a deep, profound relationship, and that's why I think the song is so powerful in its own right. So that's why I think it's a really good song about how time essentially affects the way we perceive one another, or how somebody maybe perceives you. So that's that song. The next song that I briefly wanted to address is called Dust in the Wind by Kansas. This song is also fairly famous. One of Kansas's most well-known, probably. And what I like about this song, even though it doesn't address time specifically in the song, unlike the previous song that I mentioned, I think time has a lot to do with this song. Especially if you listen to the lyrics, how it says, nothing lasts forever but the earth and sky. All we are is dust in the wind. Like, eventually, as time moves on, we will become nothing anymore. We're just sort of material, and that's how the world is, and that's just reality. That's really, I think, the whole point and message of this song is that you know, it's time is not your friend. Hi.
So what's your GPA now?
3.4 something. That's with the that's with when it's all calculated from all the previous ones. But the GPA that I earned this semester was 3.9. 3.925, yeah. And that's only because of the A minus, but that doesn't do anything really.
Cool.
It's really close, yeah.
Okay. So when you're still in bed tomorrow, and I'm gonna go see if I can get a lunch.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll be sure to do that. Okay. Sorry about that. I was just talking with my mom real quick about some things that have just came up, and happy for that all these things are kind of arranged out. But again, back to Kansas. Kansas, Dust in the Wind. The reason why I think this particular song has to do a lot with time is because of how it's addressing the whole concept of dust in the wind. Dust in the wind is reflective of time and what eventually time does to us. And I think that's really what it's trying to say in a nutshell, is that, you know, maybe life is really all that you got, and, you know, maybe it's the best thing to do is to, you know, don't worry about what you don't know, and instead focus upon and realize that your ultimate impact upon the grander scheme of things, the universe, and time doesn't really care about you, and that time is not something that you should really hang on to, because it's not going to hang on for you. And I think that's really all this song is trying to say, is that ultimately ultimately, eventually, time has a way of destroying us, and that it's important that we don't take this time that we have for granted. And it's important that you don't hold on to this idea that maybe everything is going to last forever, because maybe nothing does last forever. And even the song says nothing lasts forever but the earth and sky. So it's really, I think, trying to hammer down this point of warning people about time and what time does to people, and how ultimately what ends up happening to everybody is what really all that we really are to time as a whole. All we are to time is dust in the wind. We're insignificant. So I think it's just trying to, I think this song is kind of a very depressing sort of approach into addressing time, but I think it's a very realistic and a very haunting kind of reminder to us that, you know, we won't amount to anything in the end of the day to time, but because time ultimately destroys us. But it's important that, you know, you don't take that time for granted, and that you don't hang on to some hopeless idea that maybe somehow you're gonna outbeat time, because you're not going to do it. You and I, or whoever's watching this, you and I are only limited to what we know, and that's really what the song is ultimately trying to say to you and to speak to you. And I think that's very powerful, and I think people should be aware even of certain things, even if those things are of a harsh reality and are really a part of what life entails. So again, it is kind of a more not the most uplifting song in the world, but it does address, I think, time in a way that gives people an idea of, you know, that certain things you just can't change, and time has a way of ultimately destroying us. So I think it's just relatable, even though it may be a sort of hard for people to take in, because it is sort of a harsh reflection upon reality. So that's that song. Next song I wanted to talk about is called Good Riddance, sometimes known Time of Your Life by Green Day. Now, whether you dislike or like Green Day, this particular song, I think, speaks to me because not only is the acoustic guitar I think a nice touch to the song, but I also like the lyrics as well, especially when it's addressing time within the lyrics. And for the most part, it has a different way of approaching time than the other two previous songs that I've discussed. And it's sort of like comes back to this saying of, you know, life's a box of chocolate, you never know what you're gonna get. And it's kind of the same with time. Like, sometimes you never know what happens within time, and what's going to happen in the future, what's going to happen tomorrow when you wake up. You know, it's kind of trying to express that reality, especially when it starts off right in the beginning of the song. It says, another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time wraps you by the wrist and directs you where to go. Time basically kind of ultimately shows what ends up happening and what ends up impacting a lot of what you end up becoming, or what you end up doing with your life. And I think it's important that people sort of realize that, you know, it's something that you can't really plan out or map out. It's not like you can plan or map out your life. You can take steps to going to whatever goals or whatever accomplishments you wish to achieve, but ultimately sometimes there are things that are not within your power ultimately within life. And I think that's really what the song is trying to say, especially when it says it's something unpredictable, and by it means like life is unpredictable. And it's also something that you learn from, and I find that just very relatable and understandable, especially when you may be dealing with things that that you've never been exposed to before within a certain time within your life, and then you sort of realize and grow from them, and you maybe don't make the same mistakes, or you go in a completely different direction than you were previously. You just never know where time's going to take you, and you never know where life is going to take you. So it's sort of a unpredictable kind of part of existence, and that's why I think it's so important that people understand that ultimately the time that they have is something that can't be ultimately mapped out, but it can be explored, and it can be and then it can be figured out based upon where time maybe directs you. So it's that kind of a song, and then I think he almost the person singing the song, the narrator, technically he's almost saying it in almost to sort of like maybe someone he knows, someone he cares about. It's sort of expressing, you know, a sort of a lesson to somebody, especially when he says, I hope you have the time of your life, sort of, you know, I hope that no matter what happens with where time takes you, that, you know, you figure out within the direction that time takes you, that it impacts your life in a positive way. I think the song is just trying to express, you know, the things that you go through time, especially when it says things like tattoos and memories and such, and addresses these kinds of things that are within the past. I think it's really about telling you how time's impact is almost and is inevitable, but ultimately you can rise to the occasion as to what time gives you, and provide something within that time, and ultimately, hopefully, it'll lead you into a positive direction. I think that's really what the song, in a nutshell, is really trying to say, for the most part. Now, this next song is really funky. It's actually a really cool song. I enjoy the song for its very creative elements. And this song is called Time by Pink Floyd. And yes, this song is very, very famous. And what I really like about this song in particular is I love the beginning when you hear like clocks and you hear alarms go off. I thought that was very creative, and I think really enhances sort of the emotions that the song wants to ultimately convey. And And the song in a nutshell sort of describes time in a similar way as kind of Dust in the Wind does, but in sort of a more, I think, not in sort of a more of a warning sense, but sort of describing how it is. Like, for example, it says something to the effect about you are young and life is long and there is time to kill today, and then you find 10 years have got behind you. And I think that's very telling too, because it sort of shows how we take time for granted, whereas Dust in the Wind is sort of telling you, hey, this is how it is. Pink Floyd is sort of telling you Pink Floyd's Time is sort of telling you, this is what you're doing with your time. You're wasting it, and then 10 years go by, and that time is gone now. And it's sort of displaying it in that kind of a sense by actually giving you sort of an example, whereas Dust in the Wind is sort of this collective understanding of time, that ultimately time destroys everything, except the earth and sky, apparently. But here it's addressing how when you're young, time feels long, and then once things start to happen and change and evolve within your life, 10 years just feel like they've gone by so fast. And I think that's fairly relatable for a lot of people. I think a lot of people have been through those circumstances where they've wasted their time at certain points, and then literally they can't believe how old they are and how much time has passed within a given frame of time. So it's really, I think, trying to address it from that angle and telling you, don't take it for granted, because it's gone once it's gone. It's you can't take yesterday back. You can only move forward. That's all you can do with time. That's all you can do really with life. And I think that has a strong impact on a lot of people. And the song in itself is fairly it's fairly Pink Floydish, it's fairly mellow in the sense, almost like you're going into another world, but at the same time it's so relatable, I think, to how reality is, that it's interesting to see Pink Floyd sort of do this kind of a song, and I think a lot of people will find it fairly appealing for its ability to sort of bridge this kind of gap with having realistic lyrics while at the same time having all of these interesting sounds that don't really sound like they're something that people would normally listen to or hear. So that's that song. And the second to last song I wanted to talk about was called Time in a Bottle by Jim Croce. And this one's a little bit more simplistic in what the song is really trying to say. And all he's trying to say is basically he wishes that he could spend all of his time with a particular person that he cares about. That's really all the song is trying to say. And he sort of addresses within it how it's sometimes hard to spend time with people that you care about because life demands other things from you. And so it kind of addresses it from that angle as well. And I think even though the song is fairly simplistic, I think it addresses a very common feeling that a lot of people share, and that a lot of people can admire and look up to, and think about as to who they want to spend their time with, and where they could see and how much they would be willing to spend time with somebody and appreciate somebody. So it's, and show time as a form of appreciation. And I think really that's all the song's trying to say in a nutshell. It's fairly slow. It's more of a romantic song, I think, and I admire its sort of simplicity and its direct meaning. And the last song that I wanted to briefly address is called "Turn, Turn, Turn" by the Byrds. And basically, this song, I think, really does a good job of summarizing different times and how that's sort of reflective onto reflective on the whole fabric of time. So, for example, in the song, it addresses opposite lyrics. Meaning, first it says a time to be born, a time to die, a time, and it addresses all these different things that are sort of the opposite. A time for war, a time for peace. And it's basically saying that, you know, there's a time for everything. There's a time when people will fight. There's a time when people will be happy. There's a time where people will be sad. And I think that's really reflective on an individual level as well as a collective level of people. Because we've had those times. We've had times of war. We've had times of peace. You know, we've had times of, you know, laughter, sadness, and we've had time to do all these different things. And even though there are ups and downs, ultimately time doesn't care about whether those things are positive or negative. It just keeps on turning. Time just keeps on turning, and it doesn't stop for anybody. And I think it's sort of trying to say that we all go through these ups and downs, but it's important to try to go through them and try to handle and deal with them, because there are going to be times where things are a certain way, and then there's going to be times where things are another way, and sometimes you can't control these things. And ultimately, time just keeps on turning, and things will change ultimately, and sometimes these changes are beyond our control. And it's really fascinating, I think, for a song to sort of address that. And it's nice to see a song look at it from that angle, because you can take it in as a more personal, as a personal issue with time, or you can take it as a whole collectively, as a world, or as a country, or as a collection of people, or a society. And you could take that song, and it pretty much encompasses things that we've all pretty much been through, and how ultimately it changes, and it doesn't care what time doesn't care whatever's happening during at one point, but we just have to keep on moving and keep on pressing, and it just turns and changes and as time goes by. So it is a really nice song, and I find myself really enjoying it a lot, and I think it's fairly pleasant in the way it sounds, and it's just sort of addressing, I think, something that's a part of our world, and a part of reality. So I think that's really all I can say in a nutshell, though, about all of these songs. I think all these songs have something to offer regarding time. Now, there's plenty of other songs that I have not mentioned that do address time, because time is a fairly broad spectrum. And when I was looking at a lot of the songs would address maybe a season or a day, or a day meaning like a point in time. But I thought that was a little bit too loose, so I wanted to make it just about time in a more broader sense. Instead of something like 3 a.m. by Matchbox 20, and the song is called 3 a.m., and yes, 3 a.m. is a time frame. But I don't believe a song like that ultimately addresses the whole entire concept, really, of time compared to a lot of the songs that I've just mentioned. So I'd be more than happy to hear anybody's thoughts of if they have any other songs that they'd like to suggest about time, and if they have any questions, comments. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I apologize that my mom came in, but I figured she would be rather quick, and she was, and she just wanted to have me answer some questions. And but I think that's really all I can say ultimately. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them. And until next time, everybody.